Hello,
Let's
welcome to
Panel
our
hier
last
im
panel
Raum
here in
Moskau.
room Moscow.
Also ich auf jeden Fall diese
Um,
Melodie, die uns immer
I'm
ankündigt, werde ich
sure
auf jeden
I
Fall heute
will
Nacht noch
hear
im
this
Ohr haben, glaube ich.
Glaubt die nächsten
melody,
Tage
this
ich auch.
tune overnight,
Ding, ding,
the
ding. Moment,
introduction,
mach
the
dann
welcome
hier.
tune.
Ich auch.
Yeah, me too.
Also, schön,
Great
dass
that
Sie
you're
da sind
here
zum Panel
for
Kann
this
KI
panel. Can
Gerechtigkeit? Wir haben
KI
heute schon
do
so viele
justice?
große
We've spoken
Fragen
about so many
besprochen und das ist
big
eine nicht
questions
weniger
today, and this is
große,
yet another
große
big
Frage.
question.
Und ja,
Great
schön,
that you're
dass
here.
Sie da sind.
Just imagine
mal
you're
vor, Sie
applying
bewerben
for
sich
a
auf einen
job.
Job. Der
Your
Lebenslauf, der
CV
ist
is
super.
great,
Die
your resume
Qualifikationen entsprechen
and
auch
your
genau den Anforderungen.
qualifications match the
Doch der
requirements,
Algorithmus, der
but
Ihre
the
Bewerbung sichtet, und es
algorithms
ist
that
ziemlich
filters
realistisch, dass das erstmal heutzutage auch
applications,
jetzt
and
ein
it happens
Algorithmus
very
macht,
often,
der entscheidet
decides
aber irgendwie
otherwise.
anders.
Why?
Warum? Weil
Because
der
the
Datensatz, mit dem er
data
trainiert wurde,
set
historische Vorurteile
that it
enthält.
was
Etwa zum
trained
Beispiel, dass
on
Frauen seltener in
has
technischen Berufen
a
erfolgreich
traditional
sind.
bias.
Passiert
It
ist das
happened
bei
in
Amazon, ein
Amazon.
KI-System, das
The
Bewerbungen analysiert,
AI system
Bewerbungen rausgefiltert,
filtered
in denen das Wort
out
Frauen
any
irgendwie
applications
vorkommt.
that mentioned
Übrigens auch
women.
wie die amerikanische
And the
Regierung
same is
das
true
Wort
for the
Frau aus allen
American
offiziellen
government,
Dokumenten
by the way.
rausfiltert.
But
Denken
also
Sie aber
think
auch an
of
die
about
jüngsten
the
Entwicklungen
most
in der
recent developments in
Finanzbranche. Der
finance.
schwedische
Klarna in
Zahlungsdienstleister
Sweden
Klarna hat angekündigt, keine neuen
announced they
Mitarbeiter
wouldn't
mehr
recruit
einzustellen,
any
weil
more staff because
KI-Tools wie
AI
ChatGPT
tools
die
as
Aufgaben übernehmen
ChatGPT will
sollen.
take on those
Doch
tasks. This
diese
announcement
Ankündigung
does
betrifft
not
eben nicht nur
just
einfache Tätigkeiten,
apply
auch
to
hochqualifizierte
simple tasks,
Arbeitskräfte
but
sind
also
davon
to highly
betroffen.
qualified
Diese
jobs.
Beispiele
This shows
zeigen,
that
dass KI, und ich nehme
AI,
jetzt mal
and
KI
I
als
will use
Sammelbegriff,
it
wir
as a
werden uns das
collective
gleich auf der
term, we
Bühne auch noch
will
mal so
look
ein
into it
bisschen
a bit more closely,
auseinanderdividieren.
but AI
KI
is not
ist nicht
neutral. It
neutral. Sie
learns
lernt
from
von uns und
us
spiegelt unsere
and
gesellschaftlichen
mirrors
Ungleichgewichte
societal
wider. Wenn
inequalities.
die
If the
Daten verzerrt
data
sind, werden dadurch
sets
natürlich
are
auch die
distorted,
Entscheidungen
then the
der KI
decisions will
verzerrt
also be
werden. Und das
distorted,
betrifft
not
jetzt nicht
just
nur
in terms of
Bewerbungsprozesse wie in
applications,
dem
as we
Fall,
heard, but
sondern
also
zum
when it
Beispiel
comes
auch
to loans, to
Kreditvergabe,
healthcare, and
Gesundheitsversorgung
many other
und wie
things.
vieles mehr noch.
Neben vielen anderen Stationen auch in dieser, bei der
In
LABOR-A, die
LABOR-A, we have
sehenswert sind
so
und die
many
auch
interesting
bis heute Abend
stations
noch zu
for
sehen
you
sein
to
werden,
visit.
passt zu
So
diesen ganz
go and
besonders gut auch
see
die Station der
Ghost
Film
Workers.
Ghost
It's a
Workers.
film that
Der zeigt die
shows the working
Arbeitsrealität von
reality.
Menschen, ohne
Without
die KI nämlich
AI
gar nicht
would not
möglich
be
wäre.
possible. Without
Noch
them,
ist es
AI would
also
not
so,
be
wie du
possible.
auch gerade
And
gesagt hast,
you
Martin, dass
said,
KI von
Martin,
Menschen
we
gefüttert
are
wird,
feeding
dass wir
AI.
also eigentlich
We
diejenigen
are
sind,
the
die
ones that
Ungerechtigkeiten
generate these
erzeugen.
inequalities,
Was
these
aber, und das wird in der
injustices.
letzten
And
Zeit auch
what's
viel
been discussed
diskutiert,
is
wenn
as
die
well when we
künstliche
have this artificial
Superintelligenz, wie sie
super
derzeit
intelligent
von Meta
that Meta
eventuell
might be
entwickelt wird,
developing at the
irgendwann
moment, and when it
Realität werden
becomes
sollte.
reality, well,
Ja, wir
question mark.
wagen jetzt, oder wir
Well,
probieren es auf jeden Fall,
we
den global
want
galaktischen
to
Blick zu
take
blicken
this
und
global,
stellen
this
die Fragen,
galactic
kann KI Gerechtigkeit oder
look.
kann KI uns
Can
sogar vielleicht helfen,
AI help us to
Ungerechtigkeiten zu erkennen?
recognize injustices?
Lassen wir uns
Let us
gemeinsam
find out
herausfinden, wie
together
man KI vielleicht
how
fair und
AI
gerecht
can be
gestalten
done
kann.
fairly and
Oder ist es
justly,
gar nicht
or is
möglich?
that not
Die
possible?
Frage, die stellen wir uns
We
auch.
are
Wir
looking
freuen uns
forward
sehr
to
auf
a
eine
very
spannende
interesting
Diskussion mit
discussion
unseren
with our
Experten und
experts.
Expertinnen. Und
And
ihr und Sie haben gesehen,
Julia
Julia ist
already
schon mal hier rübergegangen.
has moved over
Wir werden
there.
jetzt die
We will
Solo-Bühne
use
nochmal
the
anders
solo
nutzen.
stage in slightly
Genau.
different
Alle unsere
way.
Gäste werden eine kurze
All our
Einstiegsfrage hier
guests
auf der
will
Solobühne
get an
bekommen und dann
introductory
ganz
question
elegant zu
here and
Martin
then move
hinüberwechseln
over
und
very
dann
elegantly
sehen Sie
to
schon,
Martin.
da
Then we
sitzen
will
wir
be
dann in der
together
großen Runde
in the
und
bigger
versuchen, all
group
die
to bring
Perspektiven
all the threads
zusammenzubringen.
together.
Ich freue mich jetzt
I'm
sehr,
very
als
much
erste
looking
hier auf der
forward.
Solobühne
At the
zum
end of the
Abschluss
day,
des
sorry,
Tages
I
ist
can't
einfach der
get my
Knoten in
tongue
der Zunge
around it
noch ein
anymore.
bisschen größer. Meike
Welcome,
Zehlike
Meike
hier bei mir auf
Zehlike
der
on
Bühne zu
stage.
begrüßen. Sie
She is
ist
a
Senior
senior
Applied
applied
Scientist bei Zalando
scientist
Research im
in the
Algorithmic Privacy
algorithmic
and
privacy
Fairness
and
Team,
fairness
ganz
team
spannend, sowie
and a
Beraterin
consultant
für
for
ethische
ethic
KI bei der Passerelle
AI in the
GmbH. Und
Passerelle
das heißt,
GmbH.
Sie bringen,
And
du bringst,
we
wir haben uns
agree
auf
to be
das
in
Du
first name
geeinigt,
terms.
die Informatikerin mit
You
der
bring
Expertin für Fairness und Diskriminierungsfreiheit
IT
für künstliche
together
Intelligenz
with
zusammen. Du
fairness.
hast
You
auch
have
dazu
carried out
geforscht, deine
research.
Promotion ging
You are looking
unfaire
into
Algorithmen
unfair
und
algorithms,
dein
and
Ziel
you
hast du mal
said
so
we
beschrieben, wir
want
wollen
to know
verstehen, wo
where
Algorithmen
algorithms
diskriminieren,
are
wo wir
discriminating, how we
Verfahren
can
entwickeln
develop
können, die faire
processes that
Entscheidung
allow fair
ermöglichen.
decisions.
Wie lassen
So
sich also
how can
KI-Systeme so
AI
gestalten, dass sie
be
bestehende
designed
Ungleichheit
so
nicht
that
verstärken, sondern
they
Gerechtigkeit fördern?
bring
Das
about
ist ein großes Vorhaben, Maike.
justice rather than
Meine Frage an dich zum
reinforce
Einstieg.
entrenched thinking?
Muss denn KI eigentlich
Does
Gerechtigkeit können,
AI have to be
wenn wir
able to
selbst uns
do
eigentlich schon
AI when
streiten,
we
was
are
gerecht
already
ist?
discussing
Oder
and
kann
debating about what is just? Well, big question. I think it is utopian when we look especially at general purpose models, which have not been trained to justice, when we try and use higher standards, then we are employing for ourselves. So they can be more unjust because they are used everywhere. And obviously, you need certain guardrails. I think AI can justice if it's built for justice, but very often it's not built for fight against injustice, but for efficiency. And the functions are usually always a type of efficiency and corresponding value concepts, and justice is not part of the programming. So a super intelligence, will that be able to do values like justice? I don't believe in a super intelligence, and I'm annoyed about this debate, the people that keep talking about it. So first of all, they have an ultra-right-wing agenda, and the super intelligence that they proclaim, and when you listen to them, is a very right-wing thing. Certain form of a super intelligent entity that can do everything better than you do, and has better thoughts, even if you might want to think differently. Well, I'm sorry. Alarm bells go off for me, and it really annoys me that they garner so much attention. You get the feeling that they ring Ursula von der Leyen, and then they end up on a sofa with her to debate these things. How can that be? We have much more urgent problems. So this super intelligence debate for me is very questionable. Okay. I leave it at that. Obviously, you can challenge it in many other areas. Well, it gives us an idea how you think about it. We're really happy that you're here. And while you move over, you will get your first applause. Meike, thank you very much. Please to come over to me. And I will now introduce Clemens Suerbaum. Clemens, I think we're also on first name terms, is the overall chairman of the Works Council of Nokia. He is here and has been invited to another session, but he has stepped in for the overall Works Council member for Telecom. He unfortunately has been taken ill, so Clemens Suerbaum has been very happy to replace him. Thank you very much for that.
Hello.
Well, I think only human intelligence can do that, to replace somebody so quickly. It is amazing. So 2 people have been taken ill overnight, and it's been amazing that you are a replacement. It's been amazing to find people that contribute their knowledge, and it shows how much expertise we have in this room, expertise that we can resort to. Thank you so much. When it comes to Nokia, you have an AI framework agreement. You discussed it. You have passed it. So what happens? Is it easier to transpose justice when you have AI? I don't think so. Well, as Meike said, if it's not been trained for justice, it doesn't work anyway, or the other way around. Can you recognize injustice without AI? Absolutely, you can. And obviously, management would like to crucify me for saying that, I suppose. But I think everybody has to admit that there are injustices. If you analyze wage and salary data, you realize that women are being discriminated against. You don't need AI to know that. Then men turn up with, yes, I've been dealt with unfairly, and then we realize, yes, there are other forms of unfairness and injustice as well. But I think if a Works Council can do that, you don't need AI for that in future either. So do men rather believe in AI that say there is a gender pay gap than they believe in women's say that. Well, they probably wouldn't believe it anyway. Well, sometimes figures do lie, and sometimes they don't. Well, obviously, money doesn't multiply automatically, and justice requires money being spent on, and people don't want to give up anything that they've achieved over time. And if it means that some people will be paid less in future because others should be paid more, then people won't be very happy with that. So this framework agreement, what does it relate to? Perhaps just a few sentences on that. So what does it cover? Well, it's a certain formula because you need the legal provision to process data. You can't process data without the agreements from the works councils. So it is a formal way of doing that. And as a works council, obviously, we are using this opportunity to input the interests of the working people, because we need to look at all the various things that can happen that are not so great. Well, we talk about that later. Thank you very much and welcome, Clemens. Right, and now I continue from here. For me, it is a huge pleasure to introduce Kai Zenner as digital expert within the European Parliament. So we're not becoming smaller but bigger. We're moving to Europe. And he manages the office of Karl Voss. Why did I say Karl? I'm so sorry. Well, it may be a mixture between Kai and Axel. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Well, that was relating to your boss and not you. Anyway, so you are one of the most renowned brains when it comes to AI regulation within Europe, when it comes to the AI Act, which is an important piece of legislation framework for artificial intelligence. You said Europe has the chance to set worldwide standards so that AI is not just innovative, but also human-centric and can be used in a just form. Well, that's really interesting. So, question to you also: is justice really an aim? So, did justice get discussed explicitly? And fairness, well, it's a bit of everything, really. Perhaps I need to look back a little bit. The AI Act of the European Union is based on work at international level within OECD, UNESCO, United Nations, but also the Standardization Organization since 2010. There have been preliminary negotiations because they realized AI is not something completely new, but because of machine learning and deep learning technologies, there are certain scenarios that had not existed and had not been covered in our legislation. When it comes to OECD and the G20, in particular, there was the agreement that we need a global answer to things like fairness, justice, anti-discrimination, human oversight, and that in these areas one needs to become active. And then all the states tackled that in different ways. In China, there's automated decision-making law. In Europe, the AI Act. And it was slightly hidden in that act. So you find justice in Article 10, for example, when it comes to data governance, when it comes to documentation, to human oversight, and in the various recitals as a hidden basic principle, if you like, but there's not one article that looks at justice. We have the time, maybe one comment. We as European Parliament, my boss together with the other parliamentarians, never wanted a horizontal AI regulation because we said that when it comes to employment, AI has different risks and opportunities, so it would be better to do that on a sector level. But when it comes to that approach, the principles would have always been the ones from OECD. Another practical question, we will talk about it later. We are also talking about the various risk groups and the employment of risk groups, and they are being rated. 2024, the law came in force, and 2026, it will then be followed. So what is the gap here? Well, the parliamentarians wanted to show that they have learned when it GDPR 2016 Parliament and the member states had approved, and 2018 it entered into force in its entirety. And I think everybody remembers when photos had to be taken of various schools and classes, whatever, and people wanted to avoid that with the AI Act by making sure that the law would enter into force successively. Provisions after 6 months, then the high risk groups after 2 years, and the remainder after 3 years. Okay, great. Thank you very much for the moment. Kai, please join the others. And I continue with the next one. And that is Max Mundhenke, creative technologist. Whatever the creative part is, he will tell us. He had the experiment 100 bots in 100 days, the script generator, 2 bots for political education. And we have tried some things out. Oh, yes, we did. A lot of fun, some great things there. But I don't want to preempt it, based on the idea that AI is something for everybody, and we need to decide whether for care, for politics or democratic participation, we want to use AI with projects, for example, European election AI or German elections AI, and it's an invitation to think differently about the future. Creative technologies. And you are a creative technologist, Max. So what is creative about it? What is the motivation? 100 bots in 100 days. What gave you the idea to think about that?
Also vielleicht erstmal zum Titel. Ich lebe und arbeite in Berlin und dann darf ich
So first of all, I live and work in Berlin, and this is why you always have to use the word creative. Outside of Berlin, I always say I'm just an AI developer, but in Berlin, I'm a creative technologist. Of course, just joking. But this is about how we can use this technology, then it is obviously used. When you just scroll through your LinkedIn feeds, and everybody might feel like this, and you mostly read something about AI, this would be automation in marketing, in sales. How can you sell things more efficiently? And I think that we need to take a different approach, and we really need to think, how can we make AI working for people who do not really benefit? What kind of creative solutions do we need so that communication and participation and justice can be reconsidered? And what would be this justice momentum for you? I will tell you something about my experience with the cringe generator in a minute, but in which bot do you see most fairness or justice, and why? Well, good question. I think it really depends on the use case. That is, how we use AI and what we want to achieve with it. I built a chatbot that enables us to chat with our basic law, the German Constitution. And you might wonder, well, this is pretty clear articles. Yes, cool idea. And with this chatbot, you can also ask questions like, what is a less well-known article? And can you also try and give me the historical context? And this provides us with a completely new view on this, other than just the legal perspective, where it's just one article after the other. It does not work for neurodivergent people who need some kind of interaction, and this is how justice is something that can be achieved through reducing barriers. Have you already communicated this to the Federal Agency for Political Education? No, but we discussed electoral programs a lot. And we already had an electoral program bot because they are actually not accessible. They are not in English, for example, those election programs or platforms, and AI can do this within seconds. And I had to laugh out loud in my hotel room yesterday. I was using the business cringe generator, and I was just entering a topic, and then they just give you a story that, again, you can post on LinkedIn, so that you can generate a link to leadership. For example, mindfulness was my term, and forgetting a coffee over or spilling coffee over your laptop was some kind of a story departure or starting point for mindfulness. So that was really great. Great to have you here. And I'm also going to move over here. I have a quick question. The chat with the basic law, for example. Let me ask you naively, how many persons are actually using this? How many people use this? Click rate. Yeah, in theory this could be done, but this was something that is not really envisaged. It was my project. And, I had a lot of free time in between. Because of the restructuring with my former employer. I lost my job. That is what I wanted to say. And I had a lot of time, and I said 3.5 years of crisis communication, and, writing it on the wall is really a profession. And I was just thinking about telling positive stories, positive AI stories. 100 bots in 100 days was just in order to get click rates, in order to really show how easy it is to use AI. I am not a technologist, not a developer. I cannot code a single line, and I was really not thinking about KPIs there. Because this panel is not quite as wild as the last one, with so many different perspectives, we also have more time for participation. So if you really want to, in the last third of our conference, participate, then you can certainly do this. We have quite a number of AI experts here, or those that already have a new perspective. Yes, as a sociologist, you're always happy if there are more perspectives that are added. Meike, many believe that data are neutral if you look at data. And why is this incorrect? Or is this correct? And as a layperson, how can you really see whether an algorithm is biased? We had this example with the job applications before. Well, first of all, let me speak about the data aspect. Algorithms are not neutral either. So, data is not neutral, not only because they reflect our society, which is not neutral, but also in a more multifaceted way. First of all, the question is who collected the data, which questions were asked, who was asked. Second thing, in all data, there is a standard and a standard deviation. So when I write into a data field, I have bananas, then in the Western world, a yellow banana would pop up. But there are so many other forms of bananas, they would then have to be named explicitly. So there are bananas, and then there are other forms or types of bananas. So there is the normal cardiac arrest, or MRI, myocardial infarction, and then there is the female myocardial infarction. And then there are different perspectives. It has to do with which questions are asked, but also which stories are told again and again. Gerd Gigerenzer, for example, mentioned a story about the gender pay gap. So there is the Equal Pay Day at the end of February, I think. pretty early in the year. And then the media would always choose the headlines, women earn so much less compared to men. And then we could say men are earning 100 euros and women are earning 80 euros, and that would be the headline. And then you would say they earn 20% less. But, if you would tell the story from the female's perspective, then they would earn 25% less. So this is an eye-opener. We have just gotten used to this one perspective, and we don't even have the idea that there might be another one. Yeah, on the data thing, let me add. First of all, some people believe when I do not use woman as a label, but other words than woman, then the discrimination is removed. But this is not true, because from the CV, the AI will identify the person as a woman. So data reduction does not help. And even random data would not help. In England, a study was conducted, and people were donating data for an application. They did a genuine job application, but they told the researchers that they come from a well-off background or a poorer background and all sorts of other things that would normally not be in an application letter. So they analyzed that from the additional information, discrimination was identified, non-British origin was kind of rated more poorly. So I think believing in data so much is very difficult, because the operators then would say the discrimination would be based on different social factors, but this is too little. And I think that the AI will not be able to help us with this. Quite on the contrary, I think it is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. As you said before, as an example, if I just sort out all women, they will not be invited to the job interviews, they won't have specific positions, and then they will be less qualified at the end of the day. So AI has a bigger discrimination potential than a sexist recruiter, because this is scaling things up. Everybody on LinkedIn will then be affected. But is there the opportunity for us as laypersons to recognize this, to identify this, or don't we stand a chance? I don't think so. Mostly, the way AI works is based on statistical models. And therefore, we really have to differentiate which AI we are talking about. If we have a decision-making AI that is pre-sorting CVs, then this is different from how the system works compared to generative AI, like chatbots. But still, for individual decisions, there is nothing that you would be able to influence. But for the bots, you have a longer time horizon through which you could try and monitor those systems as an individual in interaction. But you have to really look at everything and design everything, because they have this statistical nature. Discrimination is also statistical. Programmers will not sit down and say, I want to have all women be discriminated against, or the algorithm to do this. Clemens, neutrality. Let me speak about this topic with you. Many employees are also fearful that AI will take decisions they do not understand in companies when it is about job applications or rota plans. So in co-determination, how do you handle this issue of transparency and this fear that something was done with the data? Well, the ideal situation would be that we take our risk assessment table, and there it says that it has to be transparent. And this is an instruction, and if you cannot explain this in a good way, then AI is worthless, because you need to be able to give good reasons for your decisions. And if you just say AI recommended this, I don't think this will work. No matter what the companies who sell this will tell you, I think it will not work in our day-to-day activities. And if, as an employer, you would want to have confirmation by the employee representatives, then I don't think a court will accept that AI is the only basis for the decision. So at the moment, this is not really a problem with us. Kai, maybe. Do you also check European legislation on this? So let us just imagine an AI would discriminate against specific groups but not violate the law. What possibilities would legislators have, or Europe? First of all, it is very important to say that at the moment it is not really easy to find out whether you are actually in breach of a law or not currently. In the recent past, Brussels was very active with new digital legislation, and especially when it comes to delimiting it with respect to existing legislation. In your case, these would be the four discrimination directives from Brussels, the Platform Work Directive. There are other pieces of legislation, and they are kind of overlapping. Sometimes they are mutually contradictory, and for users or producers, it is currently not very clear which rule is applicable to them and how they will have to behave. So this is a big problem. In the next weeks and months, we hopefully will have more clarity. The Federal Grid Agency is leading in this in order to try and cure and heal these legislative conflicts. And when it is very clear that my case might not come under a high-risk system, second part of your question, so I do not have to fulfill Annex 3, Item 4. This is something which is not applicable to me. What can I do? Well, then, of course, there will be other standards. Standardization agencies are currently working on this so that specific cases can also be covered. There are also guidelines that are in the pipeline that are also giving more details than the actual legislation. And here the Federal Network Agency and the Commission is in exchange with NGOs, with employers associations, employees associations, etc. And here the question arises, what is going to happen with best practices? This is currently discussed in Munich and elsewhere with applied AI. Many things that are currently not in the legislation, they could be part of the big AI governance concept that every company is currently developing in order to fulfill the legal requirements. So you could include specific aspects, and I'm looking over to Zalando because I think in their company this is currently done. So this means that they want to really put a focus on this. They really want to comply with specific requirements that they would not actually have to comply with by law, so customers can trust them even more. So we hope that there will be some kind of competition amongst AI developers, and at the end of the day, some requirements will be fulfilled, even though it is not really strictly speaking prohibited, but where it is ethically not reasonable and should not be done. You used to be with Zalando? Yes, before I worked there. There was a LinkedIn profile, but it's not really up to date, is it? Yeah, I think we sorted this now. Max, I would like to speak about your project very briefly, 100 days, 100 bots. Speaking about these bots, in how far can these bots promote social justice in different spheres of society? So the ones that can be programmed, and in how far do they run the risk of reproducing existing inequalities? Oh, those are really big questions. Yes, this is what we're here for. I don't think there is the one bot for this. It's really more about knowing what is actually possible in technology. When I became self-employed, the business plan was written by one of the bots. I am not a specialist in business administration, and I don't really develop business plans, but the AI can do this. And this is how I receive my subsidies without having written one single sentence. And this can help you with administrative, with formal requirements that are imposed by the offices or by the authorities. And I also created a bot for this. And I also gave this as a recommendation to people who want to start up a business. And then they just enter their use cases, and then it turns out whether they are in a high-risk group or not. And I have one customer who's working in HR tech. There we have a risk or a high-risk system, and you have the obligation for a documentation, a couple of barriers, but this is not impossible. So in the discussion, these systems are referred to way too much, and all the things that could go wrong. But actually, the simple bots, the quick wins, can have a big impact, and we're thinking too little about this. For instance, in the field of collective bargaining agreements, maybe making this available as a bot to people, it would have such an impact. It could be offered in different languages, in simple language. You could interact with them, and you could kind of get a first appraisal, and then the works councils and the employees would trust each other even more. You should see technology in that way. I know we have these big expectations, AI to solve everything, but no, we have small technical fields that will then add up to a bigger picture. It's like decades ago when people were asking who can program a website, and it could only be done by geeks, and now we have somebody who can even program bots. And I think that we really need to empower ourselves. This is going to be our future. And we also need to be able to do this ourselves, to produce this ourselves. I would have a use case, for example, the general works agreement, company agreement that have existed with us for a long time. Explain this in a simple language to somebody who's never dealt with, for example, partial retirement, and now they are given the choice and they want to have an answer, and not having to go to the Works Council first, but, just reading something first. Opening up this perspective, it is something we need to get used to. And then it will certainly be developed even further. And that is my hope, so that everybody can do this, just like everybody can do a website these days. And regulation is also providing for this Article 4 AI Act competence, if I remember this correctly. Yes, AI competence requires every employee to, first of all, being empowered to learning AI. So everybody within the company must know already what a large language model can do and what the risks are. And then this is also discussed within the company. I'm a big fan of AI. It is a perfect choice for me as a consultant because you have very, very clear guardrails that are already there. And in practice, I don't really see the criticism that is sometimes voiced. So you really need to try and have also Works Council members work with AI, because this will play a role increasingly. And how to build bots is something you can learn very quickly.
Meike, das würde mich auch mal interessieren, weil ich meine, du bist ja sicher auch auf technischer Seite einfach sehr intensiv mit dem Thema
very actively at fair AI and fair algorithms, also on a technical side. What would you advise Works Council in terms of co-determination? Where are the dangers of the use of AI, and where can it strengthen co-determination? I think I would tell people that AI at the end of the day is a new technology, and that the old co-determination tools, should I say that we have all the legislation that can already get you very far. well, it's a bit simplified, yes, but I think AI has got a larger potential in terms of how people work and how employment is designed, and compared to the past when people talked about performance assessment and data protection, now it should cover more areas, also mental health and things like that. That should be actively on people's radar when looking at AI. But I think there's so many possibilities already, particularly in Germany with a co-determination law, where you can make sure that AI's potential can be improved. I'm a huge fan of AI. I always worked on the critical side of it, but I think the technology is amazing, and I think it offers so many opportunities. The important thing is to ask the questions that need to be answered. And when it comes to AI and how it is being implemented at the moment in the super intelligence debate, it is only about to have efficiency gains, realize efficiency gains, and people don't ask, how can I make work more just that invisible work becomes visible? All these things can be asked. So we people don't ask the right questions. Well, the people that want to make money with it, they're not looking at the problems because they feel they can't make any money by looking at these problems. And I'm not sure whether that's true. Perhaps you can make money with it. Well, it's a perfect fit. Well, Parliament and my boss and the other parliamentarians were in agreement, wanted to go down that path. Ursula von der Leyen over many years talked about the third path when it comes to digitalization, made in the EU, digital made in the EU. Perhaps a little bit to be seen a little bit more with critical eyes. And the AI Act was supposed to do that. And the idea right from the start was, compared to US or Chinese AI technologies, to have a trustworthy AI, promote trustworthy AI, and to tell the population, well, you can use it because your data is secure, because less energy is being used, and all of that. All of that is sort of hidden in the AI Act. The basic idea behind the AI Act was to achieve that ultimately. And I think, or hopefully over the next years, we'll manage. However, we made quite a few mistakes. I already talked about the contradictions and the overlap. There's this positive debate. We in Europe can have a more secure AI or fairer AI that sort of somewhat moved to the background, if you like. And we can then try and counteract it with AI strategies to achieve the more positive aspects. But I think there have been communication mistakes in the past, but the core idea was exactly that. And strategically speaking, I think it makes a lot of sense, because we can close a gap here in Europe. A positive example for the use of AI, and I think it's useful to turn it around and not always see it as a threat. Council of Democracy, funded by the Hertie Foundation, it tries to improve information within companies, AI information companies, and we've been part of this program for quite some time. And they have, I think, what they call a dialogue trainer on their website, where you can try to carry out difficult conversations. And then you can put into the settings, every time I would like to get a tip, I would like to have a really difficult conversation, or somewhat difficult conversation. And it's an eye-opener what you can train. And you get the statement, well, they all want to implant a chip or vaccinate us with a chip. And you can construct, well, not constructively, but deal it with an empathetic way, and then you can put in the settings every single time the trainer gives you a tip. Well, that was all right, but perhaps you can look at this and at that. It's worthwhile trying it out. I can double check the password. Just send me a mail and I can let you have the password so you can try it out. So you can use it for positive purposes. There are a lot of tools, and sometimes it would be important to talk about positive examples as well. I would like to come back to what you said, Kai and Max, the legal framework condition, there are broad guardrails that give you a lot of room to maneuver. And Kai, you said, well, here in Europe, we should be able to use AI more. And we are saying that there might be too many rules and that might hinder innovation. From your perspective, how can we make sure that we can promote innovation in Europe and nonetheless not lose sight of justice? Because there is competition, and the competition is not based on so many rules and laws. So how can we do that? Well, it's a good question in Brussels and in politics in general. We usually move in cycles. And sometimes you exaggerate in certain things and you don't find a middle path, if you like. When it comes to certain regulative activities, they were exaggerated. There are other movements that want to deregulate everything now. So the question would be to have a value-based regulative approach so that apart basic principles such as justice, one tries to look at principle-based laws that ultimately do not cover every detail in every scenario, because that's not possible, particularly with the AI law, horizontal law, that would try and cover every use case in every sector with the same rules. That can hardly work, other than if you leave it very, very general with your requirements. Or when it comes to standards, and I talk about standards and guide rails, to then look at that on a more sectoral level. We tried that with the AI Act. Unfortunately, we became a bit too specific. I already mentioned some of the mistakes, but the basic idea was to have dynamic principle-based rules, which then, let's say, in the medical sector are complemented by code of conduct standards, code of practices, and by not having a top-down approach when it comes to giving laws to companies. And we from the financial sector, we have regulative sandboxes, and we wanted to learn how it works there. Not everything great there, but basically we found out that the state and the monitoring authorities, they benefit if there is a constant dialogue where all sides are learning. And for AI, that would mean that at the beginning, and we talked about HR, the risk group is in Annex 4 and Annex 3, sorry. And so we realized that doesn't really work. Just in your case, your client should not really be covered, but is covered by it. And then the AI Act would make it possible, quite easy terms, to have an implementation act within a few months to change the law, and where everything is covered in GDPR. That was not possible. And as far as we were concerned, certain things were already obsolete right from the start. And now we have the opportunities to change these things quickly. But in the past, it was very difficult to find agreement. And I think we learned a great deal in the wake of GDPR. And we now have more dynamic and more flexible laws, which will make it easier in future. And the only disadvantage is that when it comes to an open law, which is worked upon all the time. That means a lot of work for the public sector, but also a lot of work for the private sector. And we can see it already. The Commission every few weeks comes out with new consultations because they need feedback. And I hear it from many companies. They're saying, we can't do that. We cannot deliver all of that because we are still trying to find out what's going on. Hopefully, that will sort of even out a bit. And particularly when it comes to AI governance competences, things might get easier. Max, well, I think the basic problem is that the technological development, the speed of development is much quicker than the development of legislation. And I think you need to think differently about regulation. You can't look at each and every single case. You need to have these guardrails, and they make absolute sense. And everybody who's looking at AI or facial recognition at the workplace or scoring, that's a taboo. And it's based on a moral idea that we must all support. And on the other hand, it drives development abroad. If you look at ISO 42001, that's a dream of a standard in terms of AI management, and it becomes very relevant outside Europe because they're saying, well, Europe regulates, and in future we need to work with them. So we should have a certificate that says that we fulfill these requirements. So the AI management system norms, they make sure that AI systems that are being introduced in companies, that they cover documentation requirements, that cover human oversight, and it harks back to the AI Act. And so it is a to and fro, basically. And I think it is the right step to have guardrails as open as possible. And to be honest, I have not seen any AI work being stopped because they say regulation stops us from doing that. I think they're just excuses. We're looking at the time factor, Mike. I would like to come back to that. How do you see it? AI develops so fast that the question is, how quickly can you then look at justice? And all day we talked about justice, and we had the experience how difficult it is to try and come to grips with this topic without looking at AI. So when we talk about justice and then add the time factor that AI develops at such a fast rate that we can't keep up with our discussions regarding fairness and justice. So how do you see that? Where do you see possible solutions? Well, I must admit that I'm not really clear why the speed of development of AI is the problem. But no, the question is, AI develops so fast. So when it comes then to the question, where are the things that we need to look at in terms of whether this AI is just or not, that the development is always faster than our ability to look at justice and fairness issues? Well, I don't quite see it like that. I said it earlier, I think there are already many tools at our disposal, and Clemens talked about it earlier. You can see quite easily whether things are just or not just or fair in the working context, for example, and then obviously and envisaged also by the AI Act and by other legislation on this topic, that when it comes to certain systems, you need monitoring systems around them. So AI can be monitored to see what does AI do, how does it behave over a certain period of time, and do we see any problematic developments, and you can counteract them. So I think it is a difficult question. I understand this sort of feeling, wow, it's crazy, and yeah, well, but yeah. I think it's impressive what AI can do, but I'm not sort of part of that hype. It's sort of an explosive moment, but then it'll plateau out. That's my instinct. Well, I think that's really interesting. So does that mean the question, can AI do justice? And we talked about asking the right questions. So is it a relevant question? Well, I think that mathematically speaking, you can program ideas of justice into AI, but it's difficult to get into the companies and make them do it. But you can also achieve justice with AI by asking questions regarding justice and by also adding guardrails saying, well, AI must not do that under any circumstances. And one important aspect in terms of justice is AI valid in what it does, particularly in HR? There is so much AI which does not solve and cannot solve the problems that it promises to solve because there's no basic foundation. A lot of things are not scientific that are happening there. Still, it sells. Well, that is the problem. Yes, of course, that is a problem. And I think it's difficult, and we would have to look at a concrete system and looking at it. How can we use this system and achieve that things become juster? But generally speaking, can AI do that? That's a difficult question because we're surrounded by AI. So not just bots and LinkedIn and the Amazon example is really interesting because at least that they maintained they never used it. And it is a huge reputational damage because they're always quoted when it comes to discriminating AI, or they said they never used it. So there is an interest on behalf of the companies to design it in such a way that that doesn't happen. So AI and justice, I think we need to look more at the details. What is the situation? What is justice in this situation? And then I think it could become a bit more concrete. Well, when it comes to innovation and regulations, I think the legislator needs to be robust. It's also a marketing story. I don't really believe it, that everything becomes quicker and quicker. There are also other organs are saying, well, there's so much text in the internet that's already AI generated, and then AI use it to do more. And that's the one thing. So if you continue that thought, and you talked about the singularity, so people are already superfluous, so AI can look after itself and things like that. So if you then consider it, it would mean I make the world just that with the current models that we have.
Wie soll ich mal sagen, rechten und Milliardären gestricktes, dann gehen hier rund ums Gebäude,
have everybody behind bars because we have a system that does not want any trade union members and organized members. I think you just need to be a bit more careful because that's not the case. Well, perhaps another example also regarding the speed and how that links to fairness and justice. In the first 3 years of generative AI, more images were generated with AI than pictures were taken 100 years of photography. So the content output is huge. There's so much content, AI-generated content that's now being used to train more models. And they talk about the Habsburg problem. So what happens if synthetic data is being used time and time again? And when we go back to April this year, there was a social media meme, a trend where you take a selfie of yourself and ChatGPT can then do a Studio Ghibli image of you. So that's a studio that do cartoons, animated movies, very sophisticated. So many people work on one scene over so and so many hours and months. Some Oscars have been won and then all of a sudden somebody can push a button and can get themselves in this recognizable Ghibli style. And the designers behind it, did they get anything for it? No, of course not. And I think that is the most unjust thing that we see about AI. That is the creators are left outside, and musicians and others, they say, well, we have systems that allow the creatives to participate via distribution system. But when it comes to AI and the training of large language models, then all of a sudden, well, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that in respect because all the systems will fall down. But what the data are and where they come from, and that they should enjoy copyright, that's not part of the discussion. That's impossible for me.
Meike,
ich wollte eigentlich genau das Gleiche sagen. Also das hat ja nur funktioniert, weil die
I actually wanted to say the same thing. This only worked because the big companies were just engaging in piracy. It was not AI that was unjust. It was just the big companies who were saying we're not paying for this, but it could have been just any other technology. So I think what is actually AI doing for justice or injustice, it sounds like it's kind of a living thing, but those are people who are hiding behind this technology. So let me say, before you said that you have to get into those companies, and those are all those major companies that are actually behind this. And if you look at the world as it is right now, look at the news, go online, every day you see another disaster happening. And doesn't this mean at the end of the day that AI is reproducing even more injustice than trying to make up for this? So speaking about power, money, data, large data volumes, and if we are honest, they always stay in the same hands, and it's only just a few people, a handful of companies, to be honest, and this is not healthy either. So I don't really know how we can make progress on this one. How, from a European perspective, can we try and enter this? Do we have access to this? Are we able to do something of ourselves that can also be a counter model, or are we just kind of having to put up with this? I can recommend a book that I like a lot. It's written by a colleague from me, Hanaya LABOR-A, From Pessimism to Optimism, and there it is about using AI and social media in the global south, where this kind of pessimistic debate, we have to say, is happening mostly in the Western world. And she says that many people, especially young users that come from the global south, and will constitute the majority of users in a couple of years, they have a completely different view on these tools, and they have much less fear, interestingly. And of course, we need to wonder why this is the case and what we could learn from this. It is really a beautiful book because she's giving us many examples where AI tools and social media tools are used by people for their expression, for networking, for like minor problems, as Max just said, everyday problems that can be solved, and this big style, because AI is pretty far spread. So I think there are positive examples, and out of all those power issues, this is something that you need to resolve at the legislative level. Yes, Clemens, please, and Kai. I think we are not just stuck with those 5 big companies. I just read something. A construction company, based on all the data sheets and instructions for use made itself kind of a simple way of being able for their customers to access their data. They did not purchase a big AI model. They just used a free of charge one. They had two computers and just used one graphics card for 300, 400 euros. And then this worked after half a year with a couple of technical experts. So you don't really have to have hundreds of AI experts to do this. You can also do this by rolling up your sleeves, simply put. And Max, you also gave us a very good example. We also need to self-empower for this. And I think that this is something we should do so that we kind of lose our dependency on the big players. I would also like to invite you. Okay, so this is a request to take the floor. Yes, we have two requests to take the floor. We are going to do this immediately. So on this, let me give you the classic example. Seek from China with a pretty low amount. They generated a powerful foundation model. If you look at F13 in Baden-Württemberg, another foundation model by the government there, or a Swiss AI, Lausanne, ETH, and Swisscom, and another company, they created this as well. And all of this was with clearly a lower level of investment compared to OpenAI. But we in politics, we are closely collaborating with Alexander Geese and others, and we do see a major risk that there will be another market concentration like with Platform 1.0. It was mentioned a couple of times. These companies are so powerful and they dominate the entire AI supply chain, not only at the top with the foundation model, but also at the bottom with the B2C. So they can scale up much more easily. And existing components can also be taken off the market, or they can even drive up the prices. And companies who do not have an exclusive contract with Microsoft, for example, they will not be able to make any progress in that domain. In the AI Act, with Article 25, which is one of my favorite articles, value chain, information sharing, we try to counteract this tendency together with the creative industry. With the GPI chapter, we tried to try and put something up in order to counter this, and the Code of Practice also established specific rules, and we will see whether this works. But at the end of the day, this is only a connection or a conglomerate of different activities and mechanisms. There is also the Data Act and another act for specific platform operators. Data access, interoperability are governed through these acts. And what I want to say is that it's not one act or one initiative that can solve this conundrum. There are kind of many different hurdles that we need to put up for the big players. I'm also part of the Eurostack initiative, like Axel. And we hope that in the future, and the German government and the Commission are actually on a good way, that in the future a lot might be solved through public procurement. So that we do not always have the biggest, the fastest, and the best model on paper that is going to be chosen, and all the public money is given to specific providers or suppliers, but that through this we can also try and promote Made in Europe in a targeted way. And this is how we could counteract the massive risk of Platform 1.0 concentration for AI. I think this is another panel, really, a dedicated panel for public procurement. But first of all, let us take those two requests to take the floor, please. I just wanted to say that I come from the cultural domain, and there AI is an important factor in the transformation of our industry. And it will keep us busy for a couple of years. So my call would be, if we look at the publishing houses and what is happening there, this is really a crusade, especially against copyright rules. Large language models need to be regulated, and you really need to make sure how to do this. Thank you very much. Let us take the second comment from the floor. Yes, there in the back in the green jacket. Microphone is not on. And now people can hear me. I'm a sociologist, so that again is the third perspective on society and also the question, can AI do justice? Well, the question is by difference to the analog world, the social world. That might be the thought behind the question. And the question could also be, are AI systems fairer, unfairer, or just as fair as social systems and decisions? And my question would be, isn't this a question of attitude, that you use AI in a way that is self-reflecting, and it makes clear to the social world where inequalities are or injustices are? This would be kind of the practical application, maybe.
Jetzt höre ich dich.
Thank you for your question. Did I understand you correctly? AI as a guardian of justice?
Nee, pass
Well,
auf, ich habe den falschen
AI is monitoring itself and shows to the analog decision-making systems where we have intransparencies and injustices that are anchored as power structures in our society. If we want to do this, and the question is, do we want to do this? What do you think? I have my doubts. I think this justice topic is always kind of a struggle and a negotiation aspect. For the gender pay gap, we have already identified it. Could we do away with it? No. It takes more than just the data. And this is a struggle that no AI can do for us. And here we will always have to fight for our purposes, and this in a very down-to-earth process, sometimes supported maybe by digital tools. We might use the technology when we draft our campaigns, but the feeling for what we want to achieve together with others, together with all of you, how we can win everybody over and convince everyone. And nice data is simply not enough. If in a negotiation for job reductions, somebody told me, well, AI told me this, then I would say, oh yes, this might be one voice, but it is not decisive for my decision. Is this more legitimized than the rest? I don't really think that somebody can take the struggle away from us. I said before that specific ideas of justice can be implemented in a mathematical way. And I do believe that this is possible in principle, but which problem do you want to solve? For example, AI in the social welfare state. Then it is always asked, who are those that are committing fraud in the welfare system? But we could also ask, well, who are the people who don't even apply for welfare benefits because they don't understand the forums or the applications? This is something that could also be solved by AI. It's not the same like the idea of an AI guardian, but there are many justice or fairness issues that are absolutely pressing. And when using AI, you could really make a difference. The question is whether efficiency is the aspect we would like to concentrate on. And especially for the people who develop these systems, this is very often the thought they have. But you might also be able to use the systems in a different way and maybe program this. You could also say, As a function, I would like to have the best candidates, but at the same time, I wouldn't want women to be discriminated against. Theoretically, this is possible, even though it might not solve the problem, as Clemens just mentioned, why this is not working. But I do think that these technological opportunities, justice concepts, should also become part of AI. It is possible, and it should be used, I think. Great transition to what I wanted to say. Actually, I am pretty optimistic. And the entire parliament was pretty optimistic when it comes to the use case that was just mentioned. Let me just mention a classic example, the risk cases, social benefits, social code book 5, or access to educational institutions. I come from Lower Saxony. Let me just give you the example. Bavarian universities don't want to accept me as somebody from Lower Saxony because, and they won't give me a job because I come from Lower Saxony. That's very difficult. If you are rejected, your application is rejected. How can you refer to the fact that some decision-making criteria are wrong or discriminating? And I think it was the parliament that pushed it a lot, that especially in the AI Act, we do have the possibility to counter injustices. In Article 10, data governance, we have the obligation to disclose the data set or specific aspects to do with representativity or representativeness or other aspects. And then we have the technical documentation. So in Article 11, you have to write this down. And just like with the GDPR, you also have the right to information. As an end user or a person affected, I would have the possibility to go to the university if it used AI and say, hey, why did you reject my application? And then they really have a problem. And this is hardly doable with a human being that rejected my application. So some elements will certainly not be resolved, but if we call this systemic discrimination, this is something that you might really be able to see on paper in the near future. So I'm relatively positive if all of this works out, everything that we envisaged with the AI Act. Okay, let me just come back to the cultural aspect, but I think the colleague who asked the question has already gone. Let me comment on the publishing houses. Yes, it is right that publishing houses are struggling a lot. There are ongoing lawsuits, especially in the United States, the New York Times against OpenAI, for example, because they said, well, our articles are in OpenAI and you did not pay anything for these articles, so this is pending. And Microsoft just announced last week that they are going to use a platform or a marketplace, especially in Europe, where publishing houses can cooperate with large language models and negotiate with them. Who has the rights to those publishing house products? You can assess this in whatever way you want, but Microsoft, the US American hyperscalers, they are trying to solve our problems that we have over here. And I might look over to the EU and say it would be great if such a platform model could also be initiated by the political level. And if you could say, well, here on the continent we have a different copyright law, and here we really need to try and act against copyright violations. And then maybe there would be completely different opportunities if it was backed by the state. I don't know if this is realistic, but I wanted to dream. And I just wanted to tell you that there are approaches out there how this could be done. So if we come back to our question, can AI do justice? Should the question actually be, do the AI developers want justice? Is that the question, and not whether AI can do this? They want to earn money, I think.
Well, some of them is probably right at the bottom, but if we have our if we transpose them, then they will have to market compliant systems, but it depends on the monitoring authorities, and there are not so many penalties against US companies, or at least there haven't been so far. And I think that software developers are also interested in justice, and that perhaps they can not live it as much as they would want to because of external pressures. So if you told them this is a justice project and now go and implement it, that would be okay. Well, and perhaps we need to use AI differently as well, in such a way that we ask more about justice, that it's always part of the thinking. That's also that I'm taking away from this, something that we can push for. I would like to look around and see whether there are any questions. Okay, no questions in the chat. Are there any questions here? Any burning questions? No, not at the moment. Well, so am I right that you are fairly relaxed about it? Well, can AI do justice? I mean, that's a huge question. That might also be a dramatic question. So the question is, well, you seem very relaxed about it. Well, I don't see a huge problem, nothing dramatic happening here. We might not have the legislation if the hyperscalers wanted, yes. And so, are you relaxed? So those that don't understand it too much, are we perhaps a little bit too worried? Well, colleague just mentioned it. Of course, we see a huge redistribution happening, and that can be deeply unfair and unjust if we don't react. But you will not be able to solve this problem with AI. It's with the tools that we know, trade union work, organizing people, these things will work. Not that there is a leader AI and they will tell us what we need to do. And that sort of is the marketing structure, because they want to sell their shit, and they don't want people to hang on a minute. I do have workers' rights. They just want to sell their wares, push their wares. And because of that, they proclaim AI will tell you what's what, and you're too stupid for it anyway. And there is a very interesting keynote which touches on it, because looking at the media, AI is better in this and that, and better composer, for example, better composer, better scientist, better whatever. And very often the experiments are being done in a cognitive science setting, which uses very simplified laboratory situations. So you have a scientist in front of an empty screen, and now in the next 40 minutes think about amazing questions for research, and you then ask AI to do the same thing. But I mean, obviously this is not how science works. This is not how you generate great research ideas. It's a very unrealistic situation for these human scientists, and AI can do it quite well in that situation, but that does not mean AI is a better scientist. It just means in this measured situation, AI has got advantages. But what we need to look is what can people do much better, and there are many things, and we should focus on that. And if we then combine the possibilities of technology with what we can do very well, this is where the magic lies. And then there are big questions about redistribution, and we need to look at, sure, but this combination out of both can be strengthened and can be used for questions regarding justice, but you don't have to rely on AI. on it for it. You have to rely on things that we started 100 or 200 years ago, whatever it was. Yeah, and still topical today. Yeah. Well, being relaxed, that's probably due to the fact that the people in the panel are so nice. Well, perhaps slightly away from AI. I don't think it's the end of the world, but obviously we have to continue our fight. There's no way around it. And so there is a basic tension that you always feel as a Works Council member or a trade unionist, but I don't think AI is the huge thing. It's just one of the elements in things we need to tackle. Well, what we are just experiencing is a structural change. There have been many structural changes in the past. This time it affects white-collar workers. That's why it's being discussed so much. Of course, I have my concerns, particularly when you look at dependence on hyperscalers, for example. As somebody who's grown up with social media, I know what happens if you don't counteract it very quickly, and that a great technology can be used in the wrong way. And obviously, AI is a subject that we need to discuss more in the civil society, and that people know what's coming our way, and that we can sort of bundle ideas to make sure that at the end you have more winners than losers. This is how we need to tackle it in a structural way, and the only way forward is talking about it together, and that needs to happening in the companies, in the works councils. Question, what do you want? And then the question, how can it be implemented politically? And Kai, I think it is a nice final round. You seem quite relaxed, and you're quite close to the legislation in this respect. You know what's coming. You know what's coming our way. Perhaps you're relaxed because of that. Well, you probably realize I'm not that relaxed, because when it comes to politics, certain things go wrong. Well, what, for example? Well, the positive point, why we are relatively positive when it comes to the future, is that over the last few years in politics, in society, in business, we thought about how we can deal with this structural change, and then we have a good concept, AI Act. Yes, okay, there are some issues that we can hopefully deal with soon, and it is a task for the whole of society, for companies to look at it and to invest energy on AI governance, but also to consider that certain areas within the company will fall away, and how these things will be restructured. That comes back to what Meike said, and that was a great final word, so to say. Most of the problems, and I can't find the German term, are coming back in a new skin, if you like, or in a new cloak. And these are problems that we time and time again in our society. AI sort of gives us maybe a slightly different perspective on these things, but they've always been there. And why I look fairly negatively at certain things relating to your question is that politics quite often seems to be inclined to be active and knee-jerk, and because of that, I think good preparation is being ignored, because people are saying, oh, well, no, it's too expensive, and now we want global AI, and that shouldn't have any rules and things like that. And another big issue in politics is that people do not talk to one another. In Germany, everybody knows this, and it's BMJ, BMK, and others. And in Brussels, it's even worse in the Commission. So there is a huge chaos, huge confusion, and AI is a very horizontal issue where so many aspects need to be looked at together. A deep fake, protecting our youth, security, so many things need to come into play. And there I'm concerned. because I don't see that our public sector manages this very well. Yes, very many positive things, but there are also a number of pitfalls, and we all have a positive feeling, but it could be undermined. And that takes us back to the questions that we have been looking at in the course of the day. Can we do justice? And are we talking with each other enough? And how do we talk to each other? So that maybe brings us down to a more banal level, but ultimately those are the core questions that we've been looking at. Martin. Well, what can I say?
Was mich so ein bisschen beruhigt an der Stelle ist, dass ihr als Expertinnen und
makes me a bit calmer is that yes, you have your concerns and you're looking at it, but there is sort of a basic relaxation about it. You have a different look at it, and on the one hand, it gives rise to concern that the problems that we've been grappling with for a while, we still haven't come to grips with, but we have the tools and we know how we can tackle them, and perhaps AI will sort of lose this sort of overwhelming kind of myth. Thank you so much for your expertise. Thank you for being here. Thank you very much for this conversation.